Hello, everyone. My name is Buki Adejobi. I am the career coach here at Code Chrysalis. We are a coding bootcamp here in Tokyo, Japan. Today, I am here with TJ Epperson, an alumni. I graduated from the program a while ago, and today we'll be talking about what life has been for him as a developer since graduating the Immersive many years ago. Okay, wonderful. So please tell us a little bit about yourself, where you're from, how long you've been in Japan.
Sure. So I'm originally from Atlanta, Georgia in the United States. I came to Japan, I guess about 11 years ago now, and originally moved to Hiroshima. It was in Hiroshima after working there for a while that I ended up, getting married and having a child. And after, seeing my child start to grow up a little bit, that's when I realized that, I needed to make some bigger career moves in my life. And that's what eventually motivated me to come to Tokyo and find Code Chrysalis and start here.
Okay. So what made you choose, software engineering and Code Chrysalis?
So software engineering I had always had as a hobby since a child. Actually started when I was about 12 years old with Visual Basic, which you don't really see much anymore. But I kind of just fumbled my way through programming from a young age. And, I grew up with the .com boom and everything. So, making websites, learning what HTML was, and a lot of copy pasting way back then is how I got basically my introduction into programming.
Okay.
So for Code Chrysalis, though, it was kind of just Googling. I remember that code camps and basically those specialty schools started having a big boom. And I originally looked in the US for some online courses too, but a lot of them were very expensive or a little bit inaccessible. And Code Chrysalis seemed to be the most realistically accessible and affordable at the time. So I just kind of decided to give it a shot. Okay.
And so a lot of self-learning. And before the Immersive, what was your career?
Most of or pretty much all of my learning was just by myself, trial and error a lot. And I had most recently fumbled around with, C# and Windows Forms, but certainly not enough to make a career out of it. Before then, in Hiroshima, I was working at an eikaiwa, which I feel is a pretty common, a very common trap that a lot of people fall into. And I think a lot of people, when they come to Japan, they find it's a good way to come to Japan and see a different part of the world. They don't realize, however, that there's not really anything, I should say maybe glorious about it. There's no special feeling about working in that industry, at least for me. It doesn't feel necessarily like I'm serving a greater, purpose or it's a dead-end job right from the start. There's not really any verticality to it. And I think a lot of people get stuck in that and they find it really hard to transition to something else. So that was very, luckily for me, because I had the background and the interest in engineering, I kind of had an out. From there, finding Code Chrysalis and coming here.
Okay. And now do you feel like you're making that, I want to say impact or that sense of accomplishment, achievement, or that feeling?
Absolutely. That's what it is. It's a sense of accomplishment for sure. I can actively motivate myself to perform better and see results from that, whether it's, on a day-to-day basis or for my career trajectory. And I couldn't do that before.
Okay. So let's take a step back and talk about your experience during the Immersive. When did you graduate from the Immersive program?
So I graduated from cohort 9. Which was roughly, I don't know how many years, 6 years ago?
2019, more? I believe.
Yeah, so around then. But My experience in the cohort.
Yeah.
So it was very cool. I came from Hiroshima and temporarily relocated to Tokyo, which was a new experience for me. I think when you move countries, especially, you become very isolated. And I think a lot of people realize that as an adult, it is incredibly hard to meet people and to make friends naturally. And for the first time in a long time to be like in an education environment and to have a whole bunch of new people around me, since going to university, it was the first time in a long time to be social and to be really focused and studying on something. So I think the most valuable thing for me about Code Chrysalis I experienced when I first came here, and that was the environment. More than anything, having a place that gets you focused and keeps you with people, all of those things really work together to synergize and give you a lot of motivation. And that was absolutely the key factor for me finding the success that I did. But yeah, working on the projects and getting all the technology introduced to me. And one of the greatest benefits was that, some of the key technology gets introduced to you. So when I came here, it was you learn some React, and you learn some Vue. And once you get a chance to develop some with both, then from there on, I had the flexibility to choose and mix and match technologies that I wanted. And that was a huge advantage for me, for sure.
Okay.
Yeah, but working with the groups and being able to mix the groups and kind of being forced out of your comfort zone to work with different groups and technology. And then at the end, having more flexibility to kind of, assemble your own teams and build things the way you want was an incredible experience, for sure.
Right. So you self-taught, you self-learned before, and then you took the immersive. And so for you, if you're to compare, I guess, the experience in that sense, do you feel it was an added value to what you were learning? Like, was there any difference in terms of what you were learning on your own and then being here in the immersive?
Yeah, absolutely. I remember, so I mostly worked with C# and hadn't really touched JavaScript at all. And prior to the immersive, there's that 1 month of that, those pre-studies. Right.
Yeah.
And that was a crash course in everything I needed. And it was so in depth. And some things that might seem incredibly simple now, like the concept of callbacks and JavaScript awares, a little bit hard for me to grasp at first. But it was absolutely crucial for me to hit the points. And I think Code Chrysalis did a good job of picking out exactly the points that you needed to drill on before coming here and giving a good sense of structure. And that was important for me too, because, I spent most of my life and most of my hobbies and things that I know, I taught myself because that's in and of itself a hobby for me. And seeing the structure that they gave me an opportunity to pick and choose where I wanted to go deeper or where I wanted to segue and learn something similar but a little bit different. And I was able to do that all through the actual immersive course as well. And that was one of also a very key factor for me finding employment after.
Yeah, that was going to be my next question. So thinking back to your experience doing the immersive and then actually going into the field, working as a developer, your first job, what was that like?
Yeah, so that was a very cool experience. I interviewed around the final project, and I remember graduation day. I had taken several interviews at this startup called Bassett, and they did cryptocurrency and cryptocurrency analysis. And they needed a front-end engineer to help essentially from scratch build a Vue application where you could actually see all the analysis and the data. And I went through several interviews there and made some demo projects just to be able to interview with for them. And I went to dinner after graduation night with the final projects, the demos, with my team. And while waiting for our entrees to come, I got an email that said, all right, well, here's your offer. We'd like to hire you. And that was a very special night for sure for me. I think I have a very incredibly unique and certainly partially lucky experience in that I was hired immediately as a senior engineer.
Oh, okay.
So my entire career has been only from senior positions. And yeah, I think that's just a very kind of lucky time and place situation for me. But for sure, I worked hard being here to be able to get that opportunity. And I went in immediately and of course immediately had imposter syndrome for sure, you know, thinking going in, getting my computer, getting an introduction to everything they want to build. And of course it's from scratch. And they said, hey, we need you to do this and this and this. And the application needs to be able to do this and this. And I thought,
yeah, as a senior engineer, right off the after the boot camp.
Right. But we talked about that a lot here, and we had so many experiences with that. And I think it was a little bit advantageous that I got to start my own code base, and it was essentially working as a solo developer, which was what I had most experience with after being here. And I think a lot of junior engineers and new engineers, if they go into a job and have to look at a huge code base, that in and of itself, the onboarding is incredibly intimidating and difficult. But I got to design and structure things how I wanted to. And I spent most of my time here creating new projects and getting things running. And I chose to specialize and put all my effort into learning Vue as opposed to React when I was here. And that was another huge boon. And yeah, slowly but surely things started coming together. And I think the first experience I had where my manager looked at what I was developing and the way I was, you know, kind of integrating things from the back end with it and said, wow, that's faster than I thought. That's looking nicer than I thought. And then I thought from then, okay, all right, I can probably do this.
I can do it.
Yeah.
Okay. From a non-technical perspective, were there some things that you learned during the immersive that you thinking back feel made a huge impact in your ability to succeed in that first role?
Oh, definitely a lot of the interview practice helped. There was some elements for the interview. Well, I guess it ends up being kind of technical. Yeah, some of the technical interview help. But I gotta say, I know like, this will probably have to get cut out a lot, but I remember like Code Chrysalis had a lot of emphasis on soft skills, which I think for sure has a benefit, especially to people who may have more issues with that. I never personally felt like I had issues with those areas. I wasn't, or at least that's not an area I wanted to focus on improving necessarily.
Because I mean, I think that time you had tech talks. There were lots of presentations that you had to do during that, you know, during your cohort. I mean, I wasn't there, but I remember, you know, having discussions about what it was like back then, in the curriculum back then. Right.
I think like having the experience, everyone was set to give a tech speech, you know, presentation on tech that they were interested or a project that they've done. And I have to say, because I was able to use that as part of my interview. And I think interviewing a candidate, especially a first-time engineer, and say that they were able to give a technical presentation. And especially, you know, I chose to give a presentation on running an open source repository, an open source project. And I think that was absolutely beneficial and for sure would give anybody an advantage. And I think, you know, like it might end up being technical, but, you know, running an open source project and choosing to do that and having to work with people you don't know and especially trying to maintain code quality and feedback, but also, how do you ask these people for changes or tell people, to fix things or do things when you don't know them, and maintaining a rapport, and, talking in a way that's encouraging and at the same time doesn't demotivate them to stop doing something that they're doing for free. So, I think having those experiences helped me for sure in my interviews, but also gave me some important skills in working with new people or people you're not directly working with as well.
Or even working on the existing code base.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah, because I think now what you didn't have during your time was the Greenfield project. Now we have that where some others where the groups work on a project someone else has built or.
Oh, that's a very cool idea for sure. Yeah.
So it brings a different challenge. But how long were you at Bassett?
I was at Bassett for maybe 6 months before the company ended up selling itself off to Mercari.
Okay.
So they found some success there, and I felt happy to be a part of that. So my technology, the front end development, and also ended up getting sold. And this will be kind of a slight segue, but when I was working there, I was doing front end development for about 2 weeks. And there was a meeting in which the CEO was saying that they needed more back-end servers as well, client-facing one and one internal. But the back-end developer was also the database engineer, who was incredibly talented. But working with cryptocurrency, it was massive amounts of data. And he was basically putting all his power to that. When I heard that, essentially that he wasn't going to have any time to do with that, and they were trying to figure out, I volunteered to make the back-end servers and just kind of jumped in head first because I thought, if I can get full stack experience from my first position, that would go a long way. And I ended up building 2, REST API servers as well. So all of the technology I worked on ended up getting sold off, which was kind of a cool experience for my first. And the founders of that company were actually incredibly supportive.
Okay.
And that they announced that the company was going to essentially be closing, and the next 2 weeks they actually worked with other companies that they had connections with to find me another position.
Oh, okay.
And they wrote me incredible recommendations. They gave me great referrals, and the CEO ended up directly referring me to my next interview at a company called TrustStock that does identity verification.
Okay.
So I was able to transition smoothly from there to TrustStock, and started there as the lead front-end engineer.
Okay. So when you were at Bassett, you were a senior engineer, but were you managing a team?
Not managing. I was completely solo.
Okay. So you were an individual contributor, and then you moved to, what was the name of the other
TrustStock.
TrustStock.
Yes.
Okay. And then you moved there as a lead front-end.
Correct.
Engineer. What was that like?
So when I started there, essentially they didn't have a front-end engineer at all, and their current code base was a Vue application written by back-end engineers. And they wanted a specialist to come in and work with the code base. For my interview, I had to appraise the code base and take a look at it and answer some pretty complex questions.
Okay.
But when I first started, I was the only front-end engineer. And after adding features to it and listening to what else they wanted to do with it, I suggested that they'd be better off doing a huge refactor or essentially rewriting the application itself. And they opted to rewrite the new application, and they asked me for a proposal on how to, structure it. Okay. And and basically how to write it.
Big step.
It was huge.
After 6 months.
Yes, it was huge. So a very, very large undertaking, and I had to project as much confidence as I could. And they accepted the proposal, and they said, all right, well, we're going to give you a team too. So we need you to interview front-end engineers and decide who you want to hire. And so now for my second job, after 6 months of engineering, I'm now a lead front-end engineer, and now I'm giving interviews to junior and, mid-range, like mid engineers, and, asking them the complex questions about Vue and, structuring and components and, how would you handle these, this kind of data if you need the reactivity, what are the nuances?
I mean, first you're proposing a revamp of a company's product.
Yes, for
essentially.
And a product that's easily, we're talking, hundreds of thousands of dollars, in a $1 million company, and I need to write an application that's going to be used. It was a lot, but there was nothing for me to do except just, jump in and try to maintain as much confidence as I could, and
it was bigger than the senior project.
For sure.
6 months prior.
Yeah, for sure. So 6 months of experience, and that was my next responsibility, and it was incredible.
Was there anything? I mean, because imagine you gained a lot of experience from your time at Bassett.
Yeah.
But to take that big step to now a team lead role, was there anything, team lead role and, proposing such a big project idea to the company, thinking back to your experience during the Immersive 6 months prior? And I imagine it's kind of similar to the senior project where you propose a project idea, you basically back up the project idea, you tell them that the tech stack you want to use for them, why it makes sense, why it's beneficial for them to take this approach. Now, thinking back to your time during the Immersive, was there anything you felt helped you essentially make that presentation and lead the team?
Absolutely. I think I also had maybe a more unique experience than that for the final project, and then the project leading up to that. I had the opportunity to be the tech lead as well during the course. And that gave me some incredible insight in what it's like to lead a dev team and what kind of problems come up. And for sure. At that point, I had used Vue so much, essentially put all my eggs in one basket for that. And because of that, I was a big proponent for Vue, and a lot of people had their own reasons, whether they didn't use it much or they used it and they liked it. So especially for the final project, or not the final project, but leading up to that, we got to use it. And I found that even outside those projects, working with other people on the smaller assignments, especially if they're using Vue, I had invested into it so much that if a lot of people, if they had questions about Vue, they'd be like, ask TJ. And so they'd ask me, some at that time for sure, simple questions about, writing out the components and the directives and all that. And there was a lot of sense of accomplishment from that, and some awesome feelings for confidence and motivation to be able to answer questions about people. And that was an element that running a team that I wanted to hold on to. And I know there can't be anything worse than trying to be a lead team and have something that you're supposed to know in and out, and to tell someone, I don't know. So I wanted to avoid that as much as possible. And so working with a team and learning how to, maintain quality and try to have expertise in technology. And at the same time, because working with the back engineers, and I remember for the final project, someone was using React Native, which I had no experience in. But being able to go and try to kind of intuit your way through problems when they're having problems with technology you don't really know, and to being able to defer to other people that they don't have to be the tech lead to know much more about something than you do, and kind of balancing that out were invaluable for sure while being here, and absolutely was something I directly thought of when going into, you know, a team lead position at TrustDoc.
Okay, and how long were you there for, and how many people did you end up leading?
I was there for about 2 years, I want to say, and in the end, we were a team of 5, so about 4 front-end engineers.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And what did you what was your biggest accomplishment at the company?
I think rewriting that application, it was at the time that we were working with Vue 2, and Vue 3 was on the cusp of releasing. And it had so many excellent features, and it had a lot of different ways to improve the code structure. We know, like, one common problem, and that, you know, we definitely studied that Code Chrysalis was, you know, prop drilling, when you want to pass information between components and you end up passing it through so many, and then you have to emit it all the way back up. And that was a huge, you know, anti-pattern that was present in that code base and a lot of code bases. But, you know, Vue 3 had some excellent ways to work around that. And I really wanted to take advantage of those features, but, you know, you don't want to release a beta framework, you know, in production, things like that. So, I was able to come up with a design pattern that would allow us to create the application in Vue 2 and implement some small but very, you know, stable and functioning workarounds that when Vue 3 released, we could smoothly transition this structure, this design pattern, into the Vue 3 design pattern and not incur any technical debt for it. And being able to put that into practice, and, you know, I was working directly under the CTO. So I had his eyes on me, and when he was able to look at that proposal and then see it coming together in the way, you know, the code was moving along and at the speed it was, and, you know, to hear how happy he was with it was by far the greatest sense of accomplishment I had there. Wow.
So it sounds like you've gone from making a big impact in 6 months to making a bigger impact in your next company 2 years later.
Yeah, I mean, I guess so. That was the goal for sure. That was the goal for sure. Yeah. And it's so funny to think about that, because I kind of had the opportunity to re-feel that sense of accomplishment because I got a Switch recently, Nintendo Switch, and to sign up for their online service and stuff, like, you have to do identity verification for one of their services. And, you know, you hold up your phone, you hold, you know, whatever your ID card is, and you scan it and all that stuff. Well, I used it and I saw my technology that Nintendo was using from TrustDoc. I saw, like, the UI I designed, and I saw, like, the icons on there and everything, and the auto detection system that, like, I got to implement. And I'm like, this is an application that
I created.
Yeah, that I got to do design on.
How many years ago?
So I guess
Today.
Wow, at least 3-4 years ago, right? I was able to work on that and design it. And yeah, now even recently, I'm sure they've done a lot more with it since then, but the UI and everything was the exact same as when I created it. And yeah, that was pretty cool to see it in the wild.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I'm getting excited just getting excited for you just hearing that. Yeah. I can just imagine if it was me, I'd be over the moon. I'd post it everywhere, like, oh my, I would show all my relatives, like, oh my God.
I said it out loud when I saw it. I'm like, wait a second, this is the app that I did. This is mine. So it was an incredible experience for sure.
Would you have imagined, like, back then, before you made the decision to, you know, follow this career path, that Nintendo
No, yeah. 'Cause
You see your product.
the company was technically like a startup when I was there, but you know,
Right.
they had, you know, revenue and they were working with companies that like I had recognized, but I didn't think it'd be anything and something I would use as an end user. But yeah, when I saw that, I'm like, Nintendo's kind of big,
Yeah,
especially in Japan. So yeah, so I was shocked, really. But yeah, that was very cool. I could have never imagined that at all.
And this is recently.
Yeah, yeah, a few months ago.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. I want to skip to a question I have prepared for later, but I'm gonna hold that for now. But so you were at that company. Forgetting the name.
TrustDoc. TrustDoc.
TrustDoc.
Yeah.
So you were at TrustDoc for 2 years, and where are you now? Because I believe you went from TrustDoc to your current company.
Yes.
Yes.
So I am now at Line, which was my end goal. When I came to Code Chrysalis,
Okay.
my only goal after looking at all the companies and everything was to work at Line.
Wow.
They were a huge company. They're omnipresent in Japan, but they also have, you know, more modern work environments. They have so many teams. They work with so much technology. Their benefits are great for family. They had like on-site, you know, massages that you can go to. They had mental health care you could go to anytime. Yeah, everything about it just seemed incredible. And I thought, all I want to do is surround myself with the highest level of engineers I can. I don't want to end up at a black company. I want good work-life balance. And I want, you know, upward mobility. And that was just everything about it. And, you know, you had the stability and the size, but also, you know, they weren't stuck in the past and seemed like everything was moving forward. And I had the experience working at startups, you know, but even when, you know, going through the immersive course, I wanted there. And at that time, like in CC9, they had a job fair at the end. And they invited a whole bunch of companies, and they gave everyone a slip. And on the slip, there were 3 lines, and I said, okay, write 3 companies you'd like to interview with, and then we'll look at everybody and we'll set up the interview. And I wrote Line 3 times. That's it. That's all I wanted. All I wanted was one chance to interview with Line. I don't care about anything else. Like, I want to take my one shot. That was it.
Did you apply?
I didn't. I was not selected to interview with Line.
Okay.
So, but after the job fair ended, I went up and talked to them anyway. I told them, I was like, oh man.
Oh, they were here.
They were here.
Okay.
And some people got selected, and I was not one of them, unfortunately. But I ended up going and talked to them after everyone was finished and everyone was walking away. And I'm like, oh man, I really wanted a chance to. They're like, oh, well, we can do one now. I said, oh, that'd be super nice. But yeah, I got to sit down and talk with them a little bit, but nothing panned out. And I said, okay, well, I'll be able to get some experience and go back again. So after working at TrustDoc, I'd been there for a couple of years, and I started to feel like, you know, I was kind of on a huge exponential boom for my experience.
Yeah.
Going from, you know, Code Chrysalis and kind of getting crammed everything I wanted to, then Bassett for 6 months doing full stack, and now team lead. And I wanted to keep that trajectory.
Right.
I didn't want to, you know, plateau off.
Right.
And so I started to feel like I hit a wall. And I decided, you know, okay, maybe this is my chance. Let me get back to Line.
Okay.
And I put in an application, and I got selected for an interview and for some coding tests. And I was very anti-coding tests for everything. And actually leading up to every job I had, if they required a coding test, I'd say, no, thank you.
Oh.
Yeah, but Line wanted me to take one, and I said, well,
It's Line.
it's Line. Yeah, what are you going to do?
Yeah. Why did you say no thank you to every coding to start?
So, yeah, okay. So my personal opinion is, I know I'm not saying coding tests necessarily, you know, have no value, but as a front-end engineer, if they give me a coding test where I need to write, some algorithm for some, data structure that I'm not necessarily going to use, I get there can be value, knowing what you're capable of doing. But that's not what I'm going to be doing when I'm actually working. And if I had a coding test where I had to write, some components or some small, front-end framework or analyze something, I think that'd be beneficial. And in fact, when I ran interviews, I got to design the interview for, TrustDoc. And I created a sample, set of components and asked them to critique and code review and things like that.
Okay, so it was more no to algorithm.
Well,
for front end roles.
It was no to what essentially seemed like asking me to do something that would not reflect at all what the job is going to be.
Makes sense.
Yeah. So that was my personal feeling about it.
For line, you would do anything.
For line, for line, that was it. So that's what they're going to ask me to do. I'm going to do it.
Okay.
So I did the coding test and had the interview, and they were real happy with that. And all the interviews seemed to go really well. I got to the final interview with a very, very high position engineer in line. And the interview seemed to be pretty decent. And after that, I got a rejection letter. At the very last interview. And so this is something I think would benefit everybody for sure. I got the rejection letter and I didn't know why. So I wrote a letter in Japanese and I sent it to Line's HR. And I waited, and one day later, I got contact from Line.
What was the letter?
So
what was in the letter?
I sent a letter, and I said, basically, I had been trying to become an engineer at Line since deciding to become an engineer, and that I have, through a lot of personal effort and through a lot of very lucky circumstance, had a great start to my career, I felt. And I don't know why I was rejected, but, I told them about my experience when I was here. There were a bunch of, companies I could apply with, and I wrote Line 3 times, and I did that for a reason. And I said, maybe you guys were right. Maybe you were right to reject me. Maybe you appraised me and you feel like I want to be a good fit. But if there's something I'm lacking, if there's something that it seems like I can't do or that I'm not a good fit for, there's no way for me to improve without the opportunity.
Right.
And I know the environment at Line is one that can guarantee I can grow. And, when I'm starting out, there are a lot of things I know I don't know. And so I know how to improve and what to do better and what to focus on. But at some point, I don't know what I don't know. And that's why I need to be surrounded by people who are more talented and more capable so that I can learn what I don't know. And I just need that opportunity. So along the lines of that. And that very high position engineer contacted me and said, all right, well, let's close these gaps and find a way to get you on at Line.
Okay.
And that was the contact. And the very next day, the interview process took several weeks between, HR and then some senior engineers and then some, managing engineers and staff engineers. Took a long time. I'm sure they have very busy schedules. The next day, I was on an interview with an HR representative, with a staff engineer, and with 2 senior engineers, all on the same Zoom call. Wow. So they accommodated me very well, and they told me, ended up like the reason I got rejected is because they felt like I was too excited and motivated to work with newer technology, whereas they may want someone who's capable of working with the older code bases or dealing with the current technology and has more motivation to work there. But yeah, after talking with them, the call ended and I stayed on with HR and they hired me there and then.
Wow.
So yeah, I think that's such a huge thing because the letter is what got me the position in the end. And I think that's something very important that especially in this kind of environment, you have to give yourself every advantage that you have. And coming from Code Chrysalis into, my professional career as an engineer, that's why I chose to focus only on Vue, because I need something I can specialize in, something that gives me a reason, to be a senior engineer. And that's why I did, full stack and focused on all the elements I did. And, that's why I wrote the letter to them. You need every advantage you can get in anything that kind of sets you apart. Because I knew, people that get rejected, I don't think very many of them are writing letters.
Yeah, no.
And the kind of company, even as huge a company as they were, the kind of company that will look at that and kind of look at the more human side of an applicant is for sure a company worth staying at and growing with.
Definitely. Yeah, I mean, that is a definitely ballsy move.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, I think that's also something we try to teach or mention to students, always ask why, always follow up, even if you get a rejection.
Yeah.
Because letters like that could make a difference, right?
It did for me.
It gives you the opportunity to ask why, but also bring the attention back to why you would be a fit for them, why they should really consider you.
Right. And, that's what one of the first things they end up saying is that, okay, well, if you have this kind of attitude about working here, like this is the kind of person we want at the company. And so, yeah, that was absolutely, I think anybody should hold on to that tightly and for sure follow up. Whether it's the ideal response or not,
Yeah. But so talking about, companies in Japan, right? Line being a big one, and, you really wanting to work for them or work with them because of the environment. I mean, you've worked at 3 companies now, but looking back to your career, what are some observations you've made about the tech scene in Japan? Be it approach to hiring developers like yourself, approach to approach to new technologies or existing technologies?
Sure. I think at least pre-COVID, there was still a great startup scene. And when you get into a startup, you tend to have a little bit more flexibility with the way you work and the kind of teams you work with. But one thing I think I did notice is that a lot of people seem to think that a startup gives you the flexibility and uses modern tech and all that stuff. But a lot of them tend to have CTOs already, and those CTOs basically by themselves end up deciding what all the technology is going to be, and you need to go in there and kind of fit it. And for me, to give me the impression that what's the difference between that and a really large company? I noticed that a lot of companies will choose whatever's popular, and especially if you have CTOs that come from back end, they'll just default to React or something. And I've always felt personally, since the very beginning that, and even now, that React is popular because it's popular, but not necessarily because it's more feature rich or easy to use or anything. Especially when you compare it to something like Vue and now especially Svelte and Svelte 5 coming out, that's why a lot of places I interviewed at, I asked them, what's the reason you choose the technology? And if they can't give me a good answer, I don't have interest in going any further. So Yeah, I think that just because it's a startup doesn't necessarily mean you're going to have the modern technology and the flexibility with it you may expect. As opposed to going to some medium-sized or larger companies. If you go to a large company where there's a lot of projects simultaneously, they tend to let individual groups flexibly decide the kind of technology. And I think if that's something you're aiming for, you might counterintuitively find better success at a larger company. I know small startups will definitely have very flexible work environments. But even now, working on a much larger one, I've been full remote. I've probably gone to the actual office twice, in a couple of years. So, yeah, the environments, or whether you're big or small, tend to be pretty flexible. I will say that one thing I've noticed since, I'm a front-end engineer. I really enjoyed full stack and I enjoy back-end development. But it just seems like there's a huge front-end shortage. And like there has been even since, I came to Code Chrysalis. It seems like so many more people want to be back-end engineers. And I get it. No one wants to learn 5 different ways to center a div. But
there seems to be an increase in demand for UI UX designers as well, but just really front end. But that's interesting because many people run away from back end.
I remember, when I was with my teams, it seemed like a lot of people wanted to work with back end, and because you get to write more code, you get to write algorithms, you get to write compartmentalized codes in your endpoints. It's fun.
You don't have to have a strong sense of design or aesthetics.
Exactly, because I don't. I can follow specs pretty well, but I'm not going to make any beautiful UIs by myself.
Right.
But yeah, a lot of people run from front end because you have to do some of the basic code. You have to do the the HTML. You have to do the CSS, and a lot of people, the styling in CSS can be very aggravating, especially at first. And dealing with components and reactivity, and there's a lot of nuance to it, where in the back end, it's kind of is what it is.
Straightforward. It's very logic based.
So, but ever since, coming here and applying for jobs, even applying for front end and back end, the front end, requests for interviews and the front end offers always came so much faster. And even now, my impression is that if your goal is to get a job and start your career as soon as possible, and you're willing to do whatever it takes, and you can enjoy everything equally, then front end would be advantageous, I believe.
Okay. So if you think back at your career, would you do anything differently?
In my career?
Yes, as a developer, or since finishing the immersive.
Since finishing the immersive, I don't think so. But like I said, I think I just I put a lot of effort to be able to do what I did, but I can't deny there were some incredibly lucky circumstances. I've never worked as a junior engineer, and I've was able to start working as a solo developer, creating a project from scratch, which is rare. And then my next position, I got to go into running a team, which, for the years of senior and management experience I've had, is just pretty uncommon, I'm guessing. So I can't imagine anything I wish would have been different at all. Yeah.
Okay. Now, do you manage a team, or what's the scope of your role right now?
So when I first joined Line, I joined an existing team and worked as a front-end developer working with React. And a little while into that, they asked me to work on a side project, solo, basically updating a Vue project. Once they saw me finish that, they decided to treat me as kind of like a Vue medic in a sense.
Okay.
So they would send me to other Vue applications to help me update them, you know, fix them, refactor, clean things up a bit. So I've been working on migrating a lot of Vue applications and updating them.
Okay.
And when I first came in, I had one other engineer working with me, and he ended up leaving. So now I'm working mostly solo.
Okay.
And on my next project, I'll be going to rewrite an application and lead a team for that rewrite as well.
Okay. And would you say that's your next big challenge?
Absolutely, for sure. At a company like this, where there's just a lot more finesse and a lot more expectation. They have, you know, so many different managers they're looking at. So there's a lot more to compare to. So, you know, at a small company, my management style and my team, you know, could have been perfectly fine, but there's definitely a lot more pressure for sure. And yeah, I am very much looking forward to it for sure.
Okay, great. I'm looking at the time. I realize we've taken so much of your time already. But any last words? It's been a pleasure, you know, hearing about your journey since the Immersive, since graduating, since 2019. Time has flown.
It has.
COVID happened.
Right.
COVID is gone.
Right. Yeah.
And any final words?
Yeah, I'll say that, like, coming here, the one thing I felt was that the most important thing was that that Code Chrysalis gave me was the environment. And I figured it was going to be whatever I make of it. So I was here for classes and the projects, but I was doing projects on the side, and I'd go home and code for 4 more hours. And you know, if there's something I wanted to learn that we couldn't go into depth here, like authentication, well, I'll go and I'll make a project that focuses only on that so I can learn it. And I think that extra is so crucial. So I think if I had any advice for anybody, it would be learn best practices. Whatever you do, don't do a whole lot if you don't have to, or if you can't, that's fine. But whatever you do, learn what best practices are. Because if you can do a little bit of everything, but it's not something you can use in production, it's not going to have much value. Yeah, put more effort into it than what the minimum is. Specialize in something. I wanted to start as a senior engineer, and if I do a little bit of React and a little bit of Vue and a little bit of backend or whatever, I'm shallow everywhere. So I took a risk and I threw away the popular thing and I dove hard into something, and that was a huge advantage for sure. Yeah, and there's always going to be a little bit of luck in your circumstances, but try to make and create as many circumstances as you can, for sure. So that's worked for me so far.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Thank you very, very much.
Yeah,
it's been a delight. Yeah, we will end it here.
Sure.
Please don't be a stranger. I know you are in Nagano. Nagoya.
Yeah.
It's one of the Nas.
Yeah, exactly. One of those places. Yeah, it's been great coming back, and I
Please.
appreciate you having me back for sure.
Yes, thank you. And I think we thank you all for listening. They can find you maybe on LinkedIn.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, and if you have any questions about the Immersive, feel free to reach out. If you have any questions about the Immersive, feel free to reach out. To speak with someone like TJ, or to our admin, or with our admissions team, or online. Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you.